Hello, welcome to When Silence Breaks. Before we begin with this powerful and real story, tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from. I love to hear how far these stories go, and if you like stories of overcoming hardship and truth, leave a like. It helps a lot so more people can find this type of content. Now take a deep breath, because today's story is going to make you think a lot about what family really means. The silence that followed the video was thick, as if all the air in the apartment had stopped in the middle of her chest. Leah sat motionless for minutes, the glare of the screen reflecting on her face, and the distant sounds of traffic filling the space her breathing couldn't occupy. She didn't cry right away. Her first feeling was disbelief, then a pang of shame. She thought of the years of monthly transfers, the birthdays she celebrated alone, every thank you that never came. It all fit together, the distant calls, the awkward silences, the evasive responses whenever she mentioned visiting. It was as if she finally understood the language they spoke behind her back, a language of debt and obligation. When she finally stood, she did so slowly, her gaze fixed on the fogged up window. Outside, the Portland sky was as gray as her mood. It wasn't an explosion, but a silent transformation. While the rest of the city slept, Leah began reviewing the bank records. 4 years, $96,000, each transfer accompanied by a short message for the house. Don't worry, Dad. Do it for peace of mind. She realized she'd never asked for receipts, never checked anything. She did it out of a learned reflex to fix what others broke. But that night, she understood that the price of obedience had been her dignity. She opened a folder on her computer, named it Truth, and began saving everything. Screenshots, receipts, old messages. She didn't know yet what she would do with it, but for the first time in a long time, she felt she was doing something for herself, not for them. The next morning, Leah went to work as if nothing had happened. She kept up the same routine, the cardboard-flavored coffee from the machine, the brief greetings in the hallway, the pending emails piling up. But something inside her had shifted, something that would never return. She watched people talk about their weekends, about family dinners, and felt like she was looking at another planet. For the first time, she made no effort to hide her tiredness. No one in the office suspected that this quiet woman, the one who always said nothing's wrong, was bearing the weight of a family betrayal with gritted teeth. That contained calm was her armor. That evening when she got home, she left her phone on the table without looking at it. She was afraid of seeing new messages from her uncle, or worse, her father. She turned on the desk lamp, opened the Truth folder, and continued organizing the pieces of the puzzle that was beginning to take shape. 2 days later, she discreetly called the mortgage company. She pretended it was a routine inquiry, a simple verification. The friendly voice on the other end confirmed that there were 6 outstanding payments and that the loan was almost paid off. Almost the entire house was paid off, thanks to her. Leah felt a mixture of disgust and relief. Disgust at the manipulation, relief because at least she now knew the true extent of the deception. She hung up the phone with sweaty hands and stared at her fingers as if she didn't recognize them. For years, those same hands had written checks, wiped away tears, and sent money without conditions. That morning, as she put away the document with the loan details, she thought the debt was no longer hers. It was theirs, morally and emotionally, and this time, they were going to pay it. That night, as the rain pounded the windows, Leah opened a new document and began writing without stopping. It wasn't a letter of complaint or a venting. It was a meticulous record. She noted dates, amounts, concepts, every transfer sent from her account. She copied fragments of emails and messages, even the seemingly trivial ones. When she finished, the clock read 2 in the morning, and the screen displayed something resembling a file. It wasn't revenge, she told herself. It was justice. For years, she had been everyone's invisible support, and now she wanted a record of that to exist, if only for herself. Before going to sleep, she opened the video one last time. She watched it without the volume, like someone examining police evidence. In her father's expression, in her brother's laughter, she recognized something more than cruelty. She recognized the pleasure of power, and she knew that simply retreating wouldn't be enough. The next day, Leah wrote an email to herself with the subject line, "Don't forget this." In the body of the message, she wrote, "You promised yourself you'd never justify the unjustifiable again." Then, she saved copies of everything on a flash drive and hid it in a metal box under the sink. She didn't want impulsiveness to ruin her plan. She waited. During that week, she continued with her routine, but every move had a purpose. She reviewed contacts, looked up former acquaintances from her father's church, even checked social media profiles. She wanted to understand the depths of the web of appearances. The more she investigated, the more she discovered that the money she was sending wasn't just for the mortgage. Some had been donated to the local church, and some used for family dinners. It was as if her efforts had financed her own exclusion, and that was when she realized that the truth had to be made public, not to destroy, but to liberate. The following Monday, Leah decided it was time. She waited for the clock to strike 10 in the morning, the time her father usually checked her account. She knew that since she didn't see the monthly deposit, he would call, and so he did. The phone rang with the name Dad on the screen, a name that no longer meant anything to her. She answered in a calm voice, although she was trembling inside. There was no shouting, just a brief sentence that closed a cycle. "I'm not paying anymore. This ends today." When he tried to answer, Leah hung up. She didn't need an explanation. That call was her invisible boundary between the past and the present. She closed the phone and, with her heart racing, sent the email she had prepared. Subject to all who need to know, attach the receipts, the messages, and at the end, the video. With one click, she released 4 years of accumulated humiliation. The first replies arrived within minutes. Some emails returned awkward apologies, others questions laced with astonishment, and a few veiled insults. But what Leah hadn't expected was the call from the treasurer of St. Michael's Church. The woman spoke in an incredulous tone. "Your father has been receiving help from the charity fund. He said he had no family or home." Leah was speechless. In total, the man had received $48,000 in donations, while using his daughter as a personal ATM. The conversation ended with the promise of an internal investigation. Leah hung up the phone and slumped into her chair. There was no joy in her, only a strange calm, as if the weight of a lifetime had shifted a few inches from her chest. For the first time, she breathed without guilt. Over the next few hours, the message spread beyond her control. Fragments of the video began to appear on social media, shared by neighbors, former schoolmates, and even church members. The image of Frank Henderson laughing as he called his daughter the cash cow became impossible to erase. Some defended him, others angrily condemned him. Leah watched it all silently without intervening. She wasn't the type of person to revel in scandal, but deep down, she knew that every comment, every reaction was another crack in the wall that had kept her prisoner. Her father posted a message on Facebook trying to play the victim. "When your own children betray you, you understand why the world is broken." But the comments silenced him. "I saw the video, Frank. That wasn't love, it was abuse." For the first time, the truth spoke louder than he did. Kenneth, the older brother, soon showed up at her workplace. He arrived unannounced, his face red with rage, accusing her of having destroyed the family. Leah didn't move from her chair. She heard him shout that her father was contemplating suicide, that she was a heartless daughter, that he would never understand loyalty, but every word he said sounded hollow, learned, almost rehearsed. When he left, leaving a thick silence in the office, Leah called a lawyer recommended by a colleague. Grace, a woman with a firm voice and calm gaze, assured her that everything she had done was legal. "Documented truth is not defamation," she explained, "and if he tries to sue you, he'll lose." Leah hung up, feeling that for the first time, she had someone on her side. This wasn't a war over money, it was over dignity, and she wasn't going to lose that. The following weeks were a whirlwind. The Hendersons fragmented into factions. Those who asked for silence for the good of the family, and those who privately admitted that it was all true. Leah began receiving anonymous messages, some supportive, others filled with threats. But she had learned to distinguish fear from manipulation. Each attempt to intimidate her was confirmation that her decision had been the right one. Grace advised her step by step, and together they documented everything. When the church officially launched the fraud investigation, Frank lost his few remaining allies. The congregation's lawyer demanded he return the money he had improperly received. The reputation he had so hard defended crumbled. In the neighborhood, neighbors avoided him. In the cafes where he used to sit and read the newspaper, no one said hello anymore. One afternoon, as Leah walked through the park with her headphones on, she received an unexpected message from her cousin Julia, her Aunt Patricia's daughter. It read simply, "I need to see you. It's important." They agreed to meet at a discreet cafe away from the noise. Julia arrived nervous, her hands shaking, and what she confessed changed the entire meaning of everything. She told him that 12 years ago, when she was 16, she had stayed at the Hendersons' house for a few weeks, and one night her Uncle Frank had entered her room. She said she had screamed, but no one believed her. Her mother, Patricia, had chosen to remain silent. Leah listened, unable to speak, with a lump in her throat. She understood that hers had not been an isolated case of cruelty or selfishness, but part of a much darker pattern. Her father had not only exploited her, he had hurt other people as well. Grace took Julia's statement with all the seriousness of the case. They gathered the messages and dates, and soon the testimony became a key piece in the case file. If he tries to sue you, this will come out, she told her calmly. Leah wasn't seeking revenge, but she understood that the truth had to be complete, not selective. Julia cried for hours, and through tears thanked her for having been brave in the first place. Your courage gave me permission to speak, she said, before saying goodbye. That phrase remained indelibly etched in Leah's memory. For the first time, she understood that her decision to come forward hadn't just been an act of self-defense, but a spark that ignited the freedom of other silenced people. From that moment on, the story was no longer hers alone. The following days were a succession of inevitable consequences. Frank was subpoenaed by the church and faced an internal hearing. When he tried to deny the accusations, Gerald, his own brother, intervened, showing the complete original recording. No one could pretend any longer. The lawyer representing him withdrew from the case after discovering the financial irregularities. The institution expelled him and demanded the return of the funds. Kenneth disappeared, unable to bear the public shame, and Frank, isolated, began sending desperate messages to Leah. He begged for forgiveness, said he was sick, that he hadn't been himself, but she didn't respond. He closed each conversation with a firm silence, the kind of silence born not of resentment, but of clarity. He had spent half his life trying to win a love that never existed, and this was the last time he was going to try. One gray autumn afternoon, a handwritten letter arrived at her door in Frank's shaky handwriting. Leah held it for minutes before opening it. Inside was a crumpled sheet of paper and a pleading tone. I can't sleep knowing you hate me. Forgive me. I'm paying dearly for my mistakes, it said. Leah read it slowly. There was no hatred inside, only an irreversible distance. She took a pen and responded with the same serenity with which she had sent that email months ago. I forgive you for my own peace, not yours. But forgiveness is not reconciliation. These are the consequences of your choices. Folding the paper carefully, she left it on the table and didn't think about sending it again. She didn't need to. The closure had already happened inside her. Time passed. The case was local news for weeks, until it finally vanished into the newspaper's digital archives. Leah continued working, more at peace than before. Within a few months, she was promoted to head of logistics, and for the first time in years, she used her salary solely for herself. She bought a new armchair, painted the walls blue, and planted a small ficus tree by the window. Small symbols of a new beginning, but the real transformation occurred when she began writing an anonymous blog about family abuse and emotional dependency. The first posts were read by a few people, then hundreds. Many wrote in, telling her their own stories. Leah responded to each one, reminding them that telling the truth doesn't destroy, it reveals. One of those nights, while responding to comments on her blog, Leah wrote a phrase that unintentionally went viral. Family isn't blood, it's respect. And if there's no respect, walking away is also love. That post was shared thousands of times, and among the messages was one that read, if you're reading this now, tell me where you're following this story from. It wasn't a commercial invitation, but a genuine way to connect. She wanted to know if there were more people who had once felt like her, used, silenced, but determined to break the cycle. The response was overwhelming. Women from different countries began sharing their experiences. Leah read each story with a knot in her chest, understanding that by exposing her truth, she had ignited a space where others could heal as well. The blog grew so much that a small local media outlet wanted to interview her. Leah hesitated, fearing further exposure, but finally agreed. The interview was published on a Sunday morning, along with a simple, unretouched photo of her in front of the ficus tree outside her window. My name is Leah, the note read, and I learned that loyalty is not shown by enduring abuse, but by putting an end to it. The impact was immediate. She received messages of support, offers to speak, and even proposals to write a book. But what moved her most was an anonymous email, an older woman who said she had donated money to her father and, upon reading the story, decided to forgive herself for being deceived. Leah then understood that justice could also be compassionate and that her fight had not been in vain. As time passed, the Henderson name eased into a burden. Frank lost the house, which was sold at auction to cover part of the church's restitution. He ended up living in a rundown trailer on the outskirts of Salem under supervision for fraud. 3 years later, his death went almost unnoticed. Leah learned of it through a brief message from a neighbor. Sorry for your loss. He didn't respond. There were no funerals, no flowers, no speeches, just a necessary silence. That news didn't make her happy, but it didn't sadden her either. She felt that somehow the cycle had come full circle, not with vengeance, but with truth. That night she lit a small candle on the windowsill, not for her father, but for the little girl who had once wanted to be loved by him. The blog, now with thousands of followers, became a community. Leah called it Verdad Sin Apellido, truth without a last name. There she shared texts about boundaries, self-esteem, and emotional healing. Each post was an open conversation with people who found a reflection of themselves in her words. In one of those texts she wrote, "Sometimes courage isn't about standing up, it's about stopping. Stopping the abuse, stopping the cycle, stopping the silence." That phrase became the motto of the space. And in the comments, every time someone said, "I'm here from Chile, from Spain, from Argentina, and something similar happened to me," Leah responded with gratitude. CTA. If you're also reading this and recognize yourself, leave a comment telling me where you're following this story from, because knowing we're not alone is also part of healing. As the blog grew, so did invitations to speak at universities and conferences. Leah accepted some, always making it clear that she wasn't an expert, but rather a survivor sharing her experience. At each talk, she showed a printout of her first email, the one she'd sent to her entire family, and said, "This was the day I stopped begging for love and started demanding respect." The audience often fell silent, as if each word opened a rift in their own stories. Afterward, people approached her to hug her or simply say thank you. In those moments, Leah understood that vulnerability didn't make her weak, but rather deeply human. What had once been a source of shame had become a way to empower others. One afternoon, while walking through downtown Portland, she passed St. Michael's Church. She walked in without a second thought. The air smelled of melted wax and old wood. She sat in the back row, staring at the stained glass windows that filtered the light. She didn't come to pray, but to close a circle. At the same altar where her father had feigned devotion, she breathed a sigh of relief. She no longer needed explanations or apologies. She carried a notebook in her bag, and on the first page she wrote a single line: "I wasn't born to save anyone but myself." As she stepped outside, the rain was beginning to fall again, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel the cold. It was as if each drop washed away a fragment of the past that no longer belonged to her. Months later, Leah decided to take a vacation for the first time in years. She traveled alone to the Oregon coast, rented a small cabin overlooking the ocean, and left her phone on airplane mode. For the first few days, she just walked, slept, and wrote. There was no noise, no expectations, and no one who needed her. In the morning, she sat by the ocean with a cup of coffee and thought about all that had changed. She wasn't the same woman who checked her bank account to send money to an ungrateful father. Now she took care of herself without guilt. One afternoon, as the sun sank below the horizon, she wrote in her journal, "For freedom isn't always joyful. Sometimes it's just silence, but a clean silence." And in that instant, she knew she had arrived at the place she was looking for. Not a physical place, but a hard-earned peace. When she returned to Portland, her apartment felt different, brighter, more her own. On the wall of her desk, she hung a photo she'd taken at the beach, the open ocean and a thin line of light in the background. Beneath it, she wrote in marker, "Moving on is also a form of self-love." She continued with her work, with the blog, with her simple but full life. She no longer expected apologies, acknowledgments, or belated gestures. What sustained her was something stronger, the certainty of having survived by being true to herself. And every time someone new came to the blog to tell their story, Leah responded with the same words that had guided her since that dark Tuesday. "The truth hurts, but it sets you free." Over the years, Verdad Sin Apellidos, truth without a surname, transformed into a real support network. Several of the women she met there organized in-person groups, and Leah began collaborating with a foundation dedicated to victims of emotional and financial abuse. She didn't seek the spotlight. She did so because she understood the loneliness felt when abuse comes from someone who should be protecting you. At one of those gatherings, a young woman approached her and said, "Your story saved me. After reading it, I stopped sending money to my father and sought help." Leah smiled tenderly. In that moment, she understood that all the pain, the sleepless nights, the tears, and the public exposure had had a larger meaning. It wasn't revenge, it was collective reparation. The last text she published on her blog was titled, "When You Stop Trying to Be Loved by Someone Who Never Saw You." It was short, sincere, and devastating. "My name is Leah," she wrote, "and I learned that the truth can hurt, but it can also save you. I don't regret speaking it, because it was the first act of self-love in my life." She closed her laptop, poured herself a glass of wine, and looked out the window at the reflection of the city lights. She wasn't thinking about her past, but about the life she had built afterward. She smiled slightly and whispered, "I did it." Outside, the world remained the same, but inside, everything had changed. She had recovered something she should never have lost: her voice.